The woman in the pristine white SUV stepped out like she owned the world, her manicured finger already pointing at Marcus behind the gas station counter. "I deserve free gas," she declared, her voice cutting through the humid evening air. What started as an entitled demand would spiral into a 911 call that would expose secrets neither of them saw coming and leave one of them facing consequences that would change everything. Sometimes karma doesn't just knock on your door. It kicks it down. The fluorescent lights of Murphy's Gas and Go buzzed overhead as Marcus Chen wiped down the counter for the third time in an hour. At 23, he'd been managing the night shift for 2 years, long enough to recognize trouble when it pulled up in a spotless white Escalade. The woman who emerged from the driver's seat moved with the practiced entitlement of someone who'd never heard the word no and meant it to stay that way. Her blonde hair was styled in that particular way that screamed expensive salon visits, and her designer workout clothes probably cost more than Marcus made in a week. She strode through the glass doors like she was making a grand entrance, her heels clicking against the worn linoleum with sharp, staccato beats. "Excuse me," she called out before she'd even reached the counter, her voice carrying the kind of authority that expected immediate attention. "I need to speak to whoever's in charge here." Marcus looked up from the register, noting the way she'd positioned herself, chin tilted up, shoulders back, purse clutched like a weapon. He'd seen this stance before. It never ended well. "That'd be me," he said, keeping his voice neutral. "I'm the night manager. How can I help you?" She looked him up and down with barely concealed disdain, taking in his Murphy's polo shirt and name tag. "You're the manager. You look like you're barely old enough to drive." "I'm old enough to help you with whatever you need," Marcus replied evenly, his customer service smile feeling more strained by the second. "What can I do for you tonight?" She let out a sharp laugh. "Do I look like 'em to you?" "I'm probably younger than you think." She flipped her hair over her shoulder. "It's Karen. Karen Whitfield. And I have a very simple request." Marcus nodded, waiting. In his experience, customers who felt the need to announce that their requests were simple usually had the most complicated demands. Karen placed both hands on the counter and leaned forward slightly. "I need you to fill up my tank. Full service. Premium gas." "Sure thing. Pull around to pump 3 and aisle 4 free." The words hung in the air between them like a challenge. Marcus blinked, certain he'd misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" "Free gas." Karen's smile was razor-sharp. "I think that's perfectly reasonable compensation for what I've been through today." "Compensation for what, exactly?" Karen straightened up, launching into what sounded like a well-rehearsed speech. "I was at the Murphy's on 5th Street this morning, your sister store, I believe, and the service was absolutely appalling. The bathroom was dirty, the coffee was cold, and that teenage boy working there was incredibly rude to me. I complained to corporate, of course, but that's not enough. I've been a loyal Murphy's customer for years and I deserve better treatment." Marcus tried to process this. "So you want free gas because you had a bad experience at a different store?" "Exactly." Karen nodded as if he'd finally grasped a simple concept. Good customer service means making things right when they go wrong. This is your chance to restore my faith in the Murphy's brand. I mean, Karen, I understand you had a frustrating experience, but I can't just give away free gas. That's not how it works." Karen's eyes narrowed. "Excuse me. Did you just tell me no?" "I'm explaining that, no, you told me no." Her voice rose an octave. "Do you have any idea who I am?" Marcus glanced around the empty store, wondering if this was some kind of elaborate prank. "You said you were Karen Whitfield." "That's right. Karen Whitfield. My husband is David Whitfield, maybe you've heard of Whitfield Construction. We built half the commercial buildings in this city. We are not nobodies." "That's a great," Marcus said slowly. "But I still can't give you free gas. If you want to file a complaint about the other store, I can give you the corporate number, I already called corporate." Karen slammed her palm on the counter, making the display of candy bars jump. "They gave me some nonsense about looking into it and following up within 5 business days. That's not good enough. I want satisfaction now." Marcus felt his patience beginning to fray. He'd dealt with difficult customers before, but something about Karen's tone, the casual assumption that she could demand whatever she wanted and get it, rubbed him the wrong way. "Look, I sympathize with your situation," he said, trying to keep his voice calm. "But I can't authorize free merchandise without approval from my district manager and is not available until tomorrow morning. If you'd like to leave your contact information tomorrow morning." Karen laughed, but there was nothing funny about the sound. "You think I'm going to drive all the way home on fumes because you don't have the authority to make basic customer service decisions? You could pay for gas tonight and I shouldn't have to pay for gas." Karen's voice echoed through the store. "That's the whole point. I've been inconvenienced, I've been disrespected, and now you're telling me I should just accept it and pay anyway. That's not how this works in the real world." Marcus rubbed his temples, feeling a headache coming on. "Karen, I understand you're frustrated, but don't patronize me." She pointed a manicured finger at his chest. "I'm not some hysterical woman having a breakdown. I'm a paying customer making a reasonable request for compensation after poor service. The fact that you can't see that tells me everything I need to know about your management skills." "My management skills are fine," Marcus said, his professional composure finally starting to crack. "What's not fine is a customer walking in here and demanding free merchandise because she had a bad day somewhere else." Karen's mouth fell open. Did you just admit that you think my concerns aren't valid?" "I didn't say that." "Yes, you did. You basically just told me that my experience doesn't matter and that I should shut up and pay full price like everyone else." She fumbled in her purse and pulled out her phone. "Well, we'll see about that. What are you doing? What does it look like I'm doing?" Karen held up her phone, already dialing. "I'm calling the police." Marcus stared at her. "You're calling the police because I won't give you free gas?" "I'm calling the police because I'm being discriminated against." Karen pressed the phone to her ear, never breaking eye contact with Marcus. "Yes, hello. I need to report a situation at Murphy's Gas and Go on Riverside Drive. The manager here is refusing to provide reasonable customer service and I believe I'm being targeted because of who I am." "Who you are?" Marcus couldn't help himself. "And who exactly are you?" Karen covered the phone's mouthpiece. "I'm a successful white woman in an expensive car, and you're..." She looked him up and down again. "Well, let's just say I think there might be some bias at play here." The implication hit Marcus like a slap. He felt his face flush with anger and something else, hurt, maybe. The fact that she'd gone there, that she'd reduced their entire interaction to his race and her assumptions about his motivations, cut deeper than he expected. "Bias," he repeated quietly. "Yes, hello, I'm still here," Karen said into the phone, turning slightly away from Marcus. "That's right, Murphy's Gas and Go on Riverside Drive. I'm requesting an officer because the employee here is being hostile and discriminatory. I'm a paying customer trying to resolve a legitimate complaint, and I'm being treated like what?" Marcus interrupted. "Like someone who's demanding free stuff for no good reason." Karen whirled around. "See? There it is again. Officer, did you hear that?" Marcus leaned forward, his hands flat on the counter. "You know what? Call whoever you want. Call the police, call corporate, call the mayor for all I care. But I'm not giving you free gas, and I'm not going to stand here while you imply that I'm some kind of racist because I won't break company policy for you." "Company policy?" Karen's voice pitched higher. "This isn't about company policy. This is about you having a problem with customers who expect proper service. This is about you thinking you can walk into my store and make demands because your husband builds buildings," Marcus shot back. "Well, guess what? Your husband's construction company doesn't pay my salary, Murphy's does. And Murphy's doesn't give away free gas to every customer who throws a tantrum." The color drained from Karen's face, then rushed back in bright red blotches across her cheeks. "Tantrum? Did you just call me officer? Did you hear that?" "He just called me." The conversation was spiraling out of control, and Marcus knew it. He'd let his anger get the better of him, said things he probably shouldn't have. But something about Karen's attitude, her casual assumption that she could weaponize his race against him, had pushed him past his breaking point. "Yes, I'll hold," Karen said into the phone, then covered the mouthpiece again. "You have no idea what you've just done." "I told a customer no," Marcus said. "Last time I checked, that wasn't a crime." "We'll see about that." Karen's smile was cold. "When the police get here, we'll see who they believe, a respected member of this community, or some kid with an attitude problem." Officer Janet Rodriguez had been patrolling for 12 years, long enough to recognize the difference between a genuine emergency and what dispatch euphemistically called a civil disturbance. The call about Murphy's Gas and Go had all the hallmarks of the latter, a customer complaint that had escalated beyond reason. Still, protocol was protocol, and she approached the glass doors with her usual professional demeanor. The scene inside was exactly what she'd expected: a frustrated customer and a tired-looking employee, both standing stiffly on opposite sides of the counter like prizefighters waiting for the bell. The customer, a blonde woman in expensive activewear, immediately brightened when she saw the uniform. "Officer, thank goodness you're here," Karen said, her voice taking on a tone of refined distress. "I've been trying to resolve a simple customer service issue, but this young man has been incredibly hostile and unprofessional." Rodriguez nodded politely and turned to Marcus. "Evening, Marcus. What seems to be the situation here?" Marcus felt a small surge of relief that Rodriguez had used his name. It suggested she saw him as a person, not just a convenience store employee to be dismissed. "Hey, Officer Rodriguez. This customer is demanding free gas as compensation for a bad experience she had at a different Murphy's location. When I explained I couldn't authorize that, she called 911. That's a gross oversimplification," Karen interjected, her composure slipping slightly. "Officer, I'm Karen Whitfield. My husband owns Whitfield Construction. Perhaps you've heard of us." Rodriguez's expression remained neutral. "I'm familiar with the company. Can you walk me through what happened here tonight?" Karen launched into her story, her voice growing more animated as she spoke. She described her morning experience at the other Murphys, her reasonable request for compensation, and what she characterized as Marcus's increasingly aggressive refusal to help her. "And then," Karen continued, "when I tried to call corporate to resolve this, he became verbally abusive. Called me names, implied I was throwing a tantrum. I honestly felt threatened by his attitude." Rodriguez made notes in her pad, then turned to Marcus. "Is that accurate?" "I never called her names," Marcus said carefully. "I told her I couldn't authorize free gas without my district manager's approval. She got upset and said she was going to call the police. I might have gotten a little frustrated, but I never threatened her or called her names." "He's lying," Karen said quickly. "Officer, look at me. Do I look like the kind of person who would make false accusations? I'm a respected member of this community. I volunteer at the Children's Hospital, I serve on the PDA board. Why would I risk my reputation over something trivial?" Rodriguez glanced between them, her experienced eye taking in details both verbal and nonverbal. Karen's story was delivered with practiced smoothness, but there was something about her body language, the way she kept glancing toward the door, the slight tremor in her voice when she mentioned feeling threatened, that didn't quite match her words. Marcus, on the other hand, stood quietly with his arms at his sides, making direct eye contact. His frustration was obvious, but Rodriguez had seen genuine aggression before. This wasn't it. "Mrs. Whitfield," Rodriguez said, "did Mr. Chen here ever actually threaten you? Did he use specific threatening language or make any gestures that made you fear for your safety?" Karen hesitated for just a moment, long enough for Rodriguez to notice. "Well, not in so many words, but his tone, his attitude. You have to understand, officer, I know what discrimination looks like." "Discrimination?" Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. "Can you elaborate on that?" "I think it's obvious," Karen said, then seemed to realize how that sounded. "I mean, look at the situation. A successful white woman comes in with a legitimate complaint, and this employee immediately becomes defensive and hostile. If I were someone else, do you think he would have treated me the same way? Rodriguez felt a familiar knot form in her stomach. She'd seen this playbook before: privileged individuals who found themselves in uncomfortable situations they couldn't control, reaching for discrimination claims as both shield and sword. The implications hung heavy in the air, and she could see Marcus tense up. "That's not what happened," Marcus said quietly. "I treated her the same way I'd treat any customer making the same demand." "Really?" Karen's voice dripped skepticism. "So you regularly call paying customers entitled and tell them they are throwing tantrums?" "I said," Marcus started, then stopped himself. He looked at Rodriguez. "Officer, can I show you something?" Rodriguez nodded. "What is it?" Marcus gestured toward the corner of the store. "We have security cameras. They cover the whole store, including audio. Everything that happened tonight is recorded." Karen's confident expression flickered. "Security cameras?" "Yeah," Marcus said, warming to the subject. "Corporate installed them last month after we had some issues with theft. High-definition video, clear audio pickup. If you want to know exactly what was said and how it was said, we can watch the whole thing." Rodriguez looked at Karen, noting how the color had drained slightly from her face. "That sounds like an excellent idea. Mrs. Whitfield, would you be comfortable reviewing the security footage?" Well, I suppose," Karen said, but her voice had lost its earlier certainty. "Though I have to say, I find it concerning that this establishment records customers without their knowledge. There might be privacy issues there." "There are signs posted," Marcus pointed out, indicating the small placard by the door that clearly stated the premises were under video surveillance. Rodriguez walked over to examine the sign, then returned to the counter. "The signage appears to be properly posted." "Marcus, can you access the footage now?" "Sure thing." Marcus moved to a small computer terminal behind the counter. "The system stores everything for 30 days. Tonight's footage should be right here." As Marcus pulled up the security interface, Karen shifted uncomfortably. "Officer, is this really necessary? I mean, I've told you what happened. Are you saying you don't believe me?" "I'm saying that with objective evidence available, it makes sense to review it," Rodriguez replied evenly. "It protects everyone involved." The security monitor flickered to life, showing a clear view of the store interior. Marcus fast-forwarded to approximately when Karen had arrived, then let it play at normal speed. The audio quality was surprisingly good. Every word of their conversation came through with crystal clarity. As they watched, Rodriguez found herself comparing the real-time interaction to Karen's account. The discrepancies were immediately obvious. On screen, Karen was clearly the aggressor, her voice rising first, her demands becoming more insistent, her body language increasingly threatening. As she leaned over the counter and pointed at Marcus. Marcus, meanwhile, remained calm and professional throughout most of the encounter, only showing frustration near the end when Karen made her implications about discrimination. "Turn it up," Rodriguez requested when they reached the part where Karen called 911. The audio played clearly. "I'm calling the police because I'm being discriminated against. The manager here is refusing to provide reasonable customer service, and I believe I'm being targeted because of who I am." Then Marcus's voice, "Who you are? And who exactly are you?" And Karen's response, captured in perfect digital clarity. "I'm a successful white woman in an expensive car, and you're, well, let's just say I think there might be some bias at play here." Rodriguez felt her jaw tighten. On the recording, Karen's implication was even more obvious than it had seemed in person. She'd essentially accused Marcus of racial bias with no evidence whatsoever, weaponizing her race and economic status in an attempt to force compliance with her unreasonable demands. The footage continued, showing Marcus's visible hurt and anger at the accusation, followed by his admittedly sharp but not threatening response about company policy and tantrums. When the recording reached the present moment, Rodriguez turned to Karen, whose face had gone pale. "Mrs. Whitfield, would you like to revise your statement about what occurred here tonight?" Karen's mouth opened and closed several times. Well, you have to understand the context. I was already frustrated from my earlier experience, and when he refused to help me, Rodriguez interrupted gently, I need to be clear about something. Making false statements to a police officer is a crime. Filing a false police report is also a crime. Are you telling me that your previous account of these events was accurate? I wasn't filing a false report, Karen said quickly. I genuinely felt discriminated against. Based on what? Rodriguez asked. The footage shows that Mr. Chen treated you with courtesy and professionalism, even when you became increasingly demanding. At what point did you feel discriminated against? Karen's composure was crumbling. He refused my reasonable request for compensation. He explained that he didn't have the authority to authorize free merchandise, Rodriguez corrected. That's not discrimination, that's company policy. Did you actually believe you were entitled to free gas because of an unrelated incident at a different store? Oh. I've been a loyal customer for years. Companies are supposed to make things right when they mess up. Rodriguez closed her notepad. Mrs. Whitfield, I'm going to be frank with you. What I see on this footage is a customer making an unreasonable demand, becoming increasing. Detective Ray Morrison had been called in on stranger cases, but the late-night phone call from Officer Rodriguez about a false police report at a gas station had taken an unexpected turn. What started as a simple customer dispute was now sprawling into something much more complex, and as he pulled into the Murphy's parking lot at 11:47 p.m., he could see why Rodriguez had requested his involvement. Karen Whitfield sat in the back of the patrol car, no longer the commanding presence who had walked into the store 2 hours earlier. Her perfectly styled hair was disheveled, her makeup smudged from tears, and her hands shook as she spoke rapidly into her cell phone through the partially open window. David, you have to listen to me, she was saying. It's all a misunderstanding. This police officer, she's completely overreacting to a simple customer service dispute. I need you to call Jonathan, have him meet me at the station. Morrison approached Rodriguez, who was standing near the gas pumps with Marcus and another figure, a woman in her 50s wearing a Murphy's corporate jacket. Detective Morrison, Rodriguez said, extending her hand. Thanks for coming out. I think we might have something bigger than a false report here. So I heard. Fill me in. Rodriguez gestured toward the patrol car. Karen Whitfield, 42, married to David Whitfield of Whitfield Construction. Called 911 claiming she was being discriminated against by Marcus here because he wouldn't give her free gas. Security footage shows she lied about pretty much everything that happened inside. That's when it gets interesting, Marcus interjected. Detective, she claimed she needed gas because she was running on fumes, right? But look where her car is parked. Morrison followed Marcus's pointing finger to the white Escalade positioned at pump 3. Even in the dim lighting, he could see the bright yellow, out-of-order bag covering the pump handle. How long has that pump been down? Morrison asked. 3 days, said the woman in the corporate jacket. I'm Linda Santos, district manager for this region. I came as soon as Marcus called. That pump has a mechanical issue, it won't dispense fuel at all. There's no way she could have expected to get gas there. Morrison walked over to the Escalade, noting its position. So she deliberately parked at a broken pump, then went inside demanding free gas. Why? That's what we are trying to figure out, Rodriguez said. But it gets weirder. I ran her license plate while processing the arrest. This car was reported stolen 3 weeks ago. Morrison's eyebrows shot up. Stolen. Gets better, Rodriguez continued. Reported stolen by David Whitfield, her own husband. The pieces of a puzzle Morrison couldn't quite see started clicking into place. Where's the husband now? According to the dispatch log, he filed a missing person report on his wife 4 days ago, Rodriguez said. Claimed she'd been acting erratically, missed several volunteer commitments, and then disappeared entirely. He's been calling the station daily for updates. Morrison looked back at Karen, who was still talking frantically into her phone. Does she know you know about the stolen car report? Not yet. I was waiting for you. Linda Santos stepped forward. Detective, there's something else. I pulled Karen Whitfield's customer history after Marcus called me. She's never been a customer. At either of our locations? Not once. There's no record of her ever purchasing anything from Murphy's. So the whole story about being a loyal customer? Morrison began. Complete fabrication, Santos confirmed. And the complaint she claimed to have filed about our 5th Street location. Corporate has no record of any complaint from a Karen Whitfield. Ever. Morrison felt the familiar tingle that came with the case taking an unexpected turn. What had looked like a simple false report was revealing layers of deception that suggested something much more serious. Marcus, he said, walk me through exactly what happened when she first came in. Every detail you can remember. Marcus nodded, gathering his thoughts. She walked in around 9:30, acting like she owned the place. Very confident, very demanding. But now that I think about it, there were weird things about her story from the beginning. Such as? She said she'd been a loyal Murphy's customer for years, but when I asked if she had a rewards card, she said she'd forgotten it. And when she was describing the bad service at our other location, she couldn't remember the employee's name or give specific details about what made the service so terrible. Linda Santos nodded. Our customer service training emphasizes getting specific details about complaints so we can address them properly. A legitimate complaint would have names, times, specific incidents. And, Marcus continued, she seemed surprised when I mentioned the district manager. Like she didn't know how chain command worked at a gas station. Someone who's really dealt with corporate complaints would know that. Morrison processed this information. So we have a woman who's been reported missing by her husband, driving a car he reported stolen, lying about being a customer at a business she's never patronized, demanding free merchandise based on fabricated complaints, and then making false accusations when she doesn't get her way. The question is why? Rodriguez pulled out her notepad. I did some checking while waiting for you. Karen Whitfield has no criminal record, but there are some interesting civil cases. 3 lawsuits in the past 2 years, all against service businesses. A restaurant, a dry cleaner, and a hair salon. All claiming discrimination or poor treatment. Let me guess, Morrison said. All settled out of court. 2 of them, yes. The 3rd is still pending. But here's the kicker, in each case, she claimed the business discriminated against her because of her race or economic status. Same playbook. She tried tonight. Morrison walked closer to the patrol car, studying Karen through the window. She'd finished her phone call and was now staring straight ahead, her earlier panic replaced by a glassy-eyed calm that he'd seen before in people under severe stress. Officer Rodriguez, I need you to contact David Whitfield immediately. Tell him we've located his wife and his vehicle, but don't give him details over the phone. Ask him to come to the station. You think he's involved? I think he might be the key to understanding what's really going on here. Morrison turned to Linda Santos. I'm going to need copies of all your security footage from tonight, plus any documentation about your customer service policies and complaint procedures. Of course. Detective, do you think this woman has been targeting businesses for fraudulent complaints? I think that's exactly what she's been doing, Morrison replied. The question is whether she's doing it alone or if someone else is pulling the strings. As if summoned by his thoughts, Morrison's phone rang. The caller ID showed the police station. Morrison here. Ray, it's Sergeant Chen at the desk. I've got a David Whitfield on line 2, says his wife has been kidnapped. He's demanding to speak to whoever's in charge of finding her. Morrison glanced at the patrol car where Karen Saturday kidnapped. Says he just got a call from someone claiming to have his wife, demanding $50,000 for her safe return. Thing is, the voice on the call was his wife, but she was saying things that didn't make sense. Something about being at a police station and needing bail money. The puzzle pieces suddenly snapped into focus with startling clarity. Morrison looked at Rodriguez, who had heard the conversation. She called her husband from your patrol car, Rodriguez said quietly. Told him she'd been arrested, but made it sound like something else entirely. Morrison nodded grimly. And now he thinks she's been kidnapped, which means he has no idea she's been running around town filing false complaints and stealing his car. But why? Marcus asked. What's the point of all this? Morrison had seen enough domestic situations to recognize the pattern. Mental breakdown, maybe. Or maybe she's been planning something bigger and tonight was just the latest step. His phone rang again. Morrison. Detective, this is David Whitfield. I just received a ransom call about my wife. The kidnapper wants $50,000. And says I have until tomorrow morning to get it. Please tell me you're close to finding her. Morrison met Rodriguez's eyes. Mr. Whitfield, I need you to come to the police station immediately. Don't bring any money and don't try to contact the supposed kidnappers. Can you do that? Is she alive? Is Karen okay? Mr. Whitfield, your wife is safe. But there are some things we need to discuss in person. How quickly can you get here? 20 minutes, maybe less. Detective, what's going on? The person on the phone sounded like Karen, but she was saying crazy things. We'll explain everything when you get here. And Mr. Whitfield, you might want to bring your lawyer. Morrison ended the call and looked at the small group gathered around him. A missing wife who wasn't really missing, a stolen car that wasn't really stolen, false complaints designed to extort money from businesses, and now a fake kidnapping scheme targeting her own husband. Karen Whitfield wasn't just having a bad day, she was orchestrating an elaborate con game that was finally falling apart. And judging by the look of calculated desperation he'd glimpsed in her eyes, she wasn't finished yet. The police station's interview room felt smaller than usual as Detective Morrison watched David Whitfield pace back and forth, his expensive suit wrinkled from what had clearly been a sleepless night. Through the one-way mirror, Morrison could see the man's hands shaking as he tried to process what he'd just been told. I don't understand, David said for the third time. You're saying Karen wasn't kidnapped? That she called me herself and lied about being held for ransom? Morrison nodded patiently. That's correct, Mr. Whitfield. Your wife is currently in custody for filing a false police report. The call you received asking for $50,000 came from her, from our patrol car, after she'd been arrested. David sank into a chair, looking older than his 45 years. But why would she do that? Karen doesn't need money, we have money. Our accounts are joint, she has access to everything. When's the last time you actually checked those accounts, Mr. Whitfield? The question seemed to catch David off guard. Well, Karen handles most of our finances. She's always been better with that sort of thing. Why? Morrison exchanged glances with Officer Rodriguez, who sat quietly in the corner taking notes. Mr. Whitfield, when did you first notice changes in your wife's behavior? David rubbed his temples. About 6 months ago, maybe longer. She started staying out late, claiming she had more volunteer commitments. She'd always been involved with charity work, but suddenly she was at meetings or events almost every night. Did you verify these commitments? Why would I? I trusted her. David's voice cracked slightly. She's my wife, Detective. We've been married for 15 years. I thought she was just I don't know, going through a phase. Maybe empty nest syndrome, our daughter just started college. Morrison pulled out a folder and opened it. Mr. Whitfield, I need to ask you about some financial matters. In the past 6 months, have you noticed any unusual expenses? Large withdrawals, payments to unfamiliar companies, anything like that? Karen handles the books, David repeated. I sign what she puts in front of me. Are you telling me there's a problem with our finances? We are looking into it. But right now, I need you to understand something important. Your wife has been systematically targeting local businesses with false discrimination complaints, attempting to extort settlements. Tonight's incident at the gas station appears to be part of a larger pattern. David stared at him. Extortion. Karen volunteers with disabled children. She runs bake sales for the PDA. You're talking about my wife like she's some kind of criminal. Mr. Whitfield, Rodriguez interjected gently, we've documented at least 3 civil lawsuits your wife has filed in the past 2 years. All following the same pattern, claims of discrimination, demands for monetary compensation, quick out-of-court settlements. Those were legitimate complaints, David said automatically. Karen told me. He stopped, his face paling as the implications hit him. Oh God. The settlements. She said the lawyers handled everything, that the money went into a special account for legal fees. Morrison leaned forward. What money, Mr. Whitfield? David's hands were shaking more visibly now. The restaurant case, she said. We got $15,000 after legal fees. The dry cleaner, another $8,000. I never saw any of it. Karen said it was tied up in legal complications, but that it would be available eventually. And you never questioned this? She showed me paperwork, David said weakly. Official-looking documents. I'm a contractor, detective, not a lawyer. When your wife of 15 years shows you legal documents and explains how civil settlements work, you believe her. Morrison felt a familiar mixture of sympathy and frustration. He'd seen this pattern before: trusted spouses taken advantage of by partners they never suspected were capable of deception. Mr. Whitfield, I need you to think carefully. Have there been any other unusual incidents? Times when your wife's story didn't quite add up, but you dismissed your doubts? David was quiet for a long moment. The car, he said finally. 3 weeks ago, Karen said the Escalade had been stolen from the mall parking lot. She was so upset, crying, talking about feeling violated. I called the police immediately, filed the report, called the insurance company. But she didn't want me to come pick her up from the mall. Said she'd already called a rideshare. And later, when I asked her about the details, what time it happened, exactly where she'd parked, her story kept changing. Small things, but you reported it stolen anyway. Of course I did. She's my wife, and she was clearly traumatized. Or at least, I thought she was. David looked up at Morrison. She's been driving that car this whole time, hasn't she? Morrison nodded. According to our investigation, yes. Mr. Whitfield, I have to ask, do you have any reason to believe your wife might be using drugs or alcohol? Gambling? Any addiction that might explain this behavior? No, nothing like that. Karen barely drinks wine with dinner. She's always been controlled. Organized. That's one of the things I loved about her. She had her life together in a way I never did. A knock on the door interrupted them. Sergeant Chen stepped in and motioned Morrison outside. What is it? Morrison asked in the hallway. We got the financial records you requested, Chen said, holding up a thick folder. David Whitfield's bank statements for the past year. You're going to want to see this. Morrison flipped through the pages, his expression growing grimmer with each statement. Jesus Christ. What? She's cleaned him out. Systematic withdrawals. Over 6 months, always just under the amounts that would trigger automatic bank notifications. The man has no idea he's nearly broke. Chen whistled low. How much? Looks like about $200,000 transferred to accounts he doesn't know about. The fake settlement money was probably just the tip of the iceberg. She's been running some kind of long-term con on her own husband. But why the gas station thing tonight? If she had access to all that money, why try to scam free gas? Morrison studied the statements more carefully. Because she's desperate. Look at the dates. The withdrawals stopped 2 weeks ago. Right around the time she disappeared and he reported her missing. I think he finally started asking questions, maybe threatened to look into their finances. She needed a new source of income fast. So she escalated to outright fraud. And when that didn't work, she tried to fake her own kidnapping to get $50,000 more out of him. Morrison shook his head. This woman is either having a complete psychological break, or she's been planning this for months and something went wrong. He returned to the interview room, where David sat staring at his hands. Mr. Whitfield, I need you to look at something. Morrison spread the bank statements across the table. David's face went white as he scanned the numbers. This can't be right, he whispered. Our savings account had over $300,000 6 months ago. We were planning to expand the business, maybe buy a vacation home. The money is gone, Morrison said gently. Transferred to accounts your wife opened without your knowledge. Mr. Whitfield, I'm sorry to tell you this, but your wife has been systematically stealing from you for months. David made a sound somewhere between a sob and a laugh. Stealing? From me? We are married. It's community property. How can she steal what's already hers? Because she was planning to disappear, Rodriguez said quietly. The fake death, the stolen car report, the missing person case, she was setting up a scenario where you'd think she was dead while she started a new life somewhere else with your money. But she came back. She called me tonight. Morrison nodded. Because something went wrong. Maybe she ran out of cash faster than expected, maybe her new identity fell through. So she came back to try one more score, the fake kidnapping scheme. David stared at the bank statements, his entire world clearly crumbling around him. 15 years, he said softly. We've been married for 15 years. How could I not know? How could I be so stupid? You weren't stupid, Morrison said. You were trusting. And she took advantage of that trust in ways most people couldn't imagine. A commotion in the hallway interrupted them. Through the door, they could hear raised voices, one of which Morrison recognized as Karen's. I demand to see my husband. This is illegal detention. I know my rights. Morrison stood up. Mr. Whitfield, your wife is asking to see you. You're under no obligation to speak with her, but if you choose to, I'd like to be present. David looked up, and Morrison was struck by the transformation in his face. The confused, trusting husband was gone, replaced by someone harder and infinitely sadder. Oh, I want to see her, David said quietly. I want to hear her explain this. All of it. As they prepared to move to a larger conference room, Morrison couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to witness the final act of a marriage that had been a lie for longer than anyone realized. And knowing Karen Whitfield's pattern of behavior, he suspected she had at least one more surprise left to spring. The conference room at the police station had seen its share of dramatic confrontations, but Detective Morrison had rarely witnessed the complete destruction of a marriage happen in real time. Karen Whitfield sat at one end of the long table. Her lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Jennifer Cross who'd arrived 30 minutes earlier, whispering urgently in her ear. At the other end, David Whitfield stared at his wife with a mixture of hurt and disgust that was painful to watch. Let's start simple, Morrison said, settling into his chair. Mrs. Whitfield, why did you park at an out-of-order gas pump tonight? Karen's lawyer started to speak, but Karen waved her off. I made a mistake, she said coolly. It was dark, I didn't see the sign clearly. But you went inside demanding free gas as compensation for poor service at a different location. Service you never actually received at a store you've never been a customer of. I was confused. I'd had a long day. Morrison opened the folder containing the bank statements. Mrs. Whitfield, can you explain these withdrawals from your joint accounts? $200,000 moved to accounts your husband knew nothing about? For the first time, Karen's composure cracked slightly. David signed off on all our financial decisions. If he chose not to pay attention to the details, that's his failing, not mine. I trusted you. David's voice cracked across the room. Karen, I trusted you with everything. Our money, our future, our daughter's college fund is fine, Karen snapped. It's in a separate account that I manage. Don't be so dramatic, David. Where? David leaned forward. What account? I've never seen statements for any college fund. Karen's lawyer put a hand on her arm, but Karen shook it off. The Fidelity account. I've been building it for years. Morrison watched David's face carefully. Mr. Whitfield, are you familiar with this account? No, David said quietly. Karen, we talked about starting a college fund last year. You said we should wait until we had more capital from the business expansion. Because you wanted to put all our money into that ridiculous commercial project, Karen shot back. The shopping center that would have bankrupted us if I hadn't intervened. Intervened how? Karen realized her mistake too late. Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Morrison pulled out another document. Mrs. Whitfield, were you referring to the Riverside Shopping Center project? The one your husband's company was contracted to build before the financing mysteriously fell through? I don't know what you're talking about. We contacted Riverside Development this afternoon, Morrison continued. Interesting story. They said someone claiming to be David Whitfield's financial manager called them 6 months ago, expressing concerns about the project's viability. This person provided detailed financial information about Whitfield Construction that painted the company as overextended and unreliable. David stood up so quickly his chair fell backward. You sabotaged my business. Karen, that contract would have made us financially secure for years. Why would you? He stopped, understanding flooding his face. You needed me dependent on you. If I was successful, if the business grew, I'd start paying more attention to our finances. That's ridiculous, Karen said, but her voice lacked conviction. Is it? Morrison asked. Mrs. Whitfield, what were you planning to do with the money you'd stolen? I didn't steal anything. That money was as much mine as his. Jennifer Cross leaned forward. Detective, my client has cooperated fully with this investigation. Unless you're prepared to file specific charges, we are, Morrison interrupted. Filing a false police report, fraud, identity theft, and we're just getting started. But I'm curious about something else. He turned back to Karen. The fake kidnapping call, was that plan B? Karen's face went pale. What are you talking about? You've been planning this for months, maybe longer. Systematically draining your husband's accounts, sabotaging his business, setting up a scenario where you could disappear with a new identity. But something went wrong, didn't it? Maybe the fake papers fell through, maybe you ran out of money faster than expected. So you came back for one last score. That's completely, tonight wasn't about free gas, Morrison continued. You parked at a broken pump on purpose, went inside to create a scene, called 911 knowing it would escalate the situation. You were building a paper trail, weren't you? Evidence of discrimination, police harassment, maybe even a civil rights violation you could sue the city over. Karen's lawyer grabbed her arm, but Karen was staring at Morrison with something approaching admiration. You're very clever, detective. Karen, Jennifer Cross said sharply. Don't say another word. But Karen seemed beyond caring about legal advice. You want to know what really happened? Fine. I'll tell you what really happened. She turned to face David directly. I've been married to you for 15 years, David. 15 years of watching you bumble through life, making bad business decisions, trusting the wrong people, never living up to your potential. Do you know how exhausting it is to be married to someone who refuses to succeed? So you decided to steal our money. I decided to take control, Karen corrected. The lawsuits, the settlements, that was just the beginning. I was building capital for something bigger. A real business with real profits, run by someone who actually understands how the world works. By lying and cheating. Karen laughed, but there was no humor in it. David, grow up. Everyone lies and cheats. The only difference is that some people are good at it and some people aren't. You've been living in a fantasy world where hard work and honesty matter. I've been living in the real world where money and power matter. Morrison felt like he was watching a psychological autopsy. So what was the endgame, Mrs. Whitfield? Disappear with the money and start over somewhere else. Costa Rica, Karen said simply. No extradition treaty for financial crimes, beautiful weather, and my money would go 3 times as far. I had a house picked out, a new identity arranged, everything. But something went wrong. Karen's composure finally shattered completely. The identity broker took my money and disappeared. $100,000 for papers that never materialized. I was stuck here, broke, with David starting to ask questions about our finances. So you faked your disappearance to buy time. And when that didn't work fast enough, I came back for the kidnapping scheme. $50,000 would have been enough to try again, maybe find a different route out of the country. David was staring at his wife like he'd never seen her before. The volunteer work. The charity events. The PDA meetings. I was networking, Karen said. Building contacts, learning about other people's financial situations, identifying potential targets. David, that children's hospital you're so proud of me volunteering at. I was stealing donor information and selling it to telemarketing companies. The room fell silent. Morrison had dealt with plenty of criminals over the years, but the casual way Karen described her systematic betrayal of everyone who trusted her was genuinely chilling. Mrs. Whitfield, he said finally, you're under arrest for fraud, identity theft, filing false police reports, and conspiracy to commit extortion. We'll likely be adding more charges as our investigation continues. As Rodriguez began reading Karen her rights again, David spoke up quietly. Karen, why? Just a why? If you were so unhappy, why didn't you just leave? Why destroy everything? Karen looked at him with something that might have been pity. Because leaving would have meant starting over with nothing. This way, I got to start over with everything. Everything you stole. Everything I earned, Karen corrected. 15 years of marriage to you, David. She earned every penny. As they led Karen away, Morrison turned to David, who sat slumped in his chair like a deflated balloon. Mr. Whitfield. I know this is overwhelming, but we are going to need you to work with our financial crimes unit to trace all the missing money. There's a chance we can recover some of it. David nodded absently. Detective, can I ask you something? In your experience, how long do you think she was planning this? Morrison considered the question. Based on the pattern of behavior we've uncovered, I'd say at least 2 years, maybe longer. This wasn't a sudden decision, Mr. Whitfield. This was a long-term plan executed by someone who saw you as a mark rather than a spouse. 2 years, David repeated softly. Our daughter was still in high school 2 years ago. She was helping with her science fair projects, driving her to soccer practice, making family dinners. He looked up at Morrison. How do you live with someone for that long, planning to destroy their life, and still sit across from them at breakfast every morning? It was a question Morrison couldn't answer, because the truth was too cruel. Karen Whitfield had managed it because she'd never really seen David as a person at all, just as a resource to be exploited. Some predators hunted strangers, others built their lives around their prey. 3 months later, Marcus Chen received a letter in the mail. Inside was a check for $5,000 and a note from David Whitfield, thank you for standing up to her. Your courage to press charges probably saved me from losing everything. This is from the money we recovered. I thought you should know that doing the right thing sometimes does pay off. Karen Whitfield was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison for fraud and identity theft. The Children's Hospital and PDA both